Go and eat in the kitchen, Lillian said coolly, her eyes never leaving her plate. You don't belong on this table. Maya stood frozen, the smell of roasted chicken and buttered rolls twisting her empty stomach. She swallowed the lump in her throat, forcing herself not to cry as she turned silently toward the kitchen. Her steps were slow, deliberate, each one a reminder that this was no longer her home, not really. As she sat alone at the cold kitchen counter, her mind drifted to a different time, when laughter echoed in this same dining room, when her mother sat beside her, and her father held her hand while she told silly stories between bites of food. Back then, the table had felt like a place of warmth and belonging. Now, it was just a stage, and she had been pushed off it. Charles Beckett was not a man who wore his emotions on his sleeve. He had built his life, and his fortune, on control, discipline, and a deep respect for order. But all of that had been softened, transformed even, the moment he met Nia. Nia was sunlight in human form. Her laughter had a melody to it, her skin glowed like polished bronze, and her presence warmed every room she entered. Charles, a reserved white businessman with a quiet home and a colder heart, had not expected love. Especially not a love that came so boldly, so freely, and so entirely from someone who challenged everything he thought he knew about life and the world. They married in defiance of whispered judgments. There were comments, awkward silences at country clubs, friends who quietly distanced themselves. But Charles didn't care. With Nia, he had something rarer than wealth or power: peace. She taught him to laugh without restraint, to sit in silence without discomfort, to see the world in color instead of lines and labels. When their daughter, Maya, was born, Charles felt as though the universe had handed him a second son. Maya had Nia's eyes, deep and knowing, and her cocoa-toned skin. He called her his little light. She would curl up in his lap at night while he read her bedtime stories with a gentle smile, Nia's arms wrapped around both of them like a sanctuary. But paradise has its limit. Nia fell ill unexpectedly. A rare condition, aggressive and relentless. And no amount of money, specialists, or prayers could stop the inevitable. Charles remembered the smell of antiseptic, the hum of hospital machines, and Nia's final smile, tired but filled with love, as she whispered, "Take care of her, Charles. Protect her." She died on a rainy Tuesday morning, and the world grew cold. For months, Charles was a ghost of himself. The house echoed with silence, and Maya, barely old enough to grasp the permanence of death, would ask when Mommy was coming home. Charles, grief-stricken and clumsy in his mourning, tried to hold himself together for her. But he could feel himself failing, especially as Maya grew older and needed a mother's guidance, not just a father's distracted affection. That was when Lillian entered their lives. She was charming in that effortless, practiced way. Soft-spoken, elegant, with a smile that convinced even the cautious. She had 2 children of her own, Lucas, a boisterous 10-year-old, and Isabel, a delicate girl of 8 who hid behind her mother's skirts. Lillian was widowed, she said, and longed for a fresh start. She sympathized with Charles's loss. She even bent to Maya's height the first time they met, placing a hand gently on her shoulder and saying, "You must be so strong, darling. I hope we can be friends." Charles, desperate for normalcy, believed her. He believed her when she said she wanted a family again. He believed her when she told him Maya was special, and that she would love her like her own. And Maya, small and quiet, nodded politely but instinctively shrank away from Lillian's touch. The wedding was quiet, tasteful. Friends congratulated Charles on moving on. Maya wore a pale blue dress and tried not to cry, even though her mother had once promised she'd be the one to help pick her wedding dress someday. She stood beside Lucas and Isabel, their fair hair shining under the church lights, and felt like a shadow in her own father's world. At first, Lillian was everything she promised to be. Kind, attentive, even affectionate. But only when Charles was home. The moment his car disappeared from the driveway for one of his many business trips, the air in the house changed. Lillian's smile thinned into something sharp. Her tone lost its sweetness, replaced with commands and cold silence. "Don't touch that. Eat in the kitchen. Clean up after Isabel, she's younger than you. You should be grateful to even live here." And Maya, still just a child, obeyed. Not because she agreed, but because Lillian made it clear, "If you ever tell your father, I'll make sure he sends you away. After all, you don't even look like him, do you?" At night, Maya cried quietly into her pillow, clinging to memories of her mother's voice and her father's warmth, now slowly fading, like photographs left too long in the sun. Charles didn't notice. He didn't see the way Maya flinched at Lillian's touch, how she avoided eye contact, how she grew quieter, thinner, dimmer. When he did comment on Maya's weight loss, Lillian was quick with an answer. "Oh, she's just picky these days. Moody, like most girls her age. You should talk to her." And Charles did. He tried. But Maya, now afraid and ashamed, only smiled and said, "I'm okay, Daddy. I'm just tired." So he kissed her forehead and left again for another business trip, this time to Singapore, 3 weeks. And Lillian stood in the doorway waving goodbye, her children giggling behind her. As the car pulled away, she turned to Maya with a voice made of ice. "Clean the bathroom. Then the dishes. And don't even think about touching the TV." Maya nodded and turned away, her small shoulders already bearing the weight of a storm no one else could see. Maya had learned early that silence was safer. Every time she tried to speak up, every time she tried to hint to her father that something was wrong, Lillian's eyes would find hers across the room like a loaded gun, a smile plastered on her face. "Why would you lie about me, sweetheart?" she would later hiss behind closed doors. "You want to end up on the street? Because that's what will happen if you keep talking." And Maya believed her. Because she didn't know how to not believe the only adult who seemed to care when her father wasn't there. She believed her when Lillian said Charles wouldn't want a daughter who caused drama. She believed her when she was told that her skin was too dark, too different, that Lucas and Isabel looked more like Charles, and that's why he loved them more. "You're just a reminder," Lillian said once, folding towels as Maya scrubbed the bathroom floor. "A shadow of a woman he couldn't forget. And one day, he'll realize he doesn't need the reminder anymore." The words stung deeper than any slap ever could. At school, Maya wore long sleeves even in the summer, not because she was hiding bruises, Lillian was too careful for that, but because she was hiding the weariness in her body, the hollowness under her eyes. Her classmates didn't notice much. She was quiet, bright, but never bold, always fading into the background. Lucas and Isabel grew bolder with time. Lucas, now a teenager, mocked her openly. He called her names when no adults were around: charcoal, maid, step-nothing. Isabel, once timid, followed suit, parroting their mother's cruelty with smug smiles and haughty commands. "Clean my shoes. You're older. Do it. Mom said it's your job." When Maya refused once, just once, Lucas slapped her across the face. Hard. She didn't cry. She just blinked, looked him in the eye, and walked away. That night, Lillian took away her dinner and locked her in the laundry room. "You're getting too proud," she said through the door. "Don't forget who you are." Charles returned from a long trip to find Maya thinner again. She was 16 now, and her beauty was undeniable, even if it was veiled in sadness. She looked more like Nia than ever, especially in the way she smiled quietly when she was hurt. "You're not eating well?" Charles asked, concerned. "I just don't feel hungry sometimes," Maya replied. Lillian, standing beside them with a concerned frown, added, "She skips meals. Says she's watching her weight. You know how girls are." She smiled and rubbed Maya's back gently. Maya didn't flinch. She trained herself not to. Charles nodded slowly. "Maybe I'll spend more time at home. Things have been difficult at work, but maybe I've been away too much." But he didn't stay. He never stayed. Maya began counting the days until college. It was the only hope she held on to, the idea that someday she could escape. That maybe, beyond the gates of that house, there was a life waiting for her. One where she wouldn't be punished for her skin or her silence. She applied to every school that offered scholarships. And she got in. When she left, Charles hugged her at the train station. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart," he said. "Lillian packed you some food. Call me if you need anything, okay?" Maya smiled and nodded. But inside, she knew better. When she reached school, there was no food in the bag. Just a half-empty bottle of water and a folded note. "Let's see how far your pride gets you now." The first semester was the hardest. Maya was alone in a new city, with barely enough money to survive. Lillian had kept the allowance Charles sent. Rent was late. Meals were skipped. Maya worked nights, first at a diner, then as a janitor in the school's admin building. She studied by day, cleaned toilets by night, and cried quietly on weekends when the hunger made her stomach ache. Charles didn't know. She tried to tell him once, but he dismissed it. "I just sent money last week. Lillian said she gave it to you. Are you being careless again, Maya?" That word, careless, cut deeper than he realized. She hung up the call and promised herself something: "I will never ask again." She found strength in places she hadn't expected. Classmates who became friends, a professor who recommended her for a tech internship, a woman named Kimi from her dorm floor who lent her money and never asked for it back. Piece by piece, Maya began rebuilding herself. She found joy in coding, in solving problems, in building things from nothing, just like she was doing with her life. Slowly, she shed the shadow of Lillian's voice. Slowly, she remembered Nia's warmth. Slowly, she began to believe that she deserved to exist. Loudly, brightly, proudly. By the time she graduated, she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was planning. She would build a company, one that helped girls like her. She would rise so far that no one could ever make her feel small again. And when the world came knocking, she would decide who deserved to come in. Maya Beckett disappeared from the world that once broke her. In her place emerged a woman both brilliant and unreadable. Her company, Niotech Innovations, started in a cramped shared workspace with peeling paint and faulty Wi-Fi. She didn't have much, but she had ideas. Maya poured herself into her work the way she once poured herself into survival, with quiet determination and zero margin for failure. She developed a small software tool that helped rural clinics digitize patient records, which earned her recognition from a local health NGO. That connection led to more. She got a grant, hired her first intern, then 2 developers, then 3 more. Maya didn't wear fancy suits. She wore black hoodies and kept her natural hair in tight coils. She never raised her voice in meetings, but when she spoke, people listened. She was only 24, but she carried herself like someone who had lived 10 lives. Still, loneliness lingered. There were no family calls. No visits during the holidays. Just occasional texts from Charles that became fewer with time. "Hope school is going well. Lillian says you're not picking calls again." She stopped replying. By the time she was 27, Niotech had offices in 2 cities and a reputation for bold, practical solutions. But Maya still kept her personal life tightly locked. She hadn't changed her number, yet Charles never called. She told herself it didn't matter. Then came the government bid. It was the kind of contract that could change the trajectory of her company forever, supplying secure database systems to state health departments nationwide. Maya's company passed all the technical qualifications, and she was invited to select contractors to support materials and hardware. Dozens of companies sent in bids. Among them, Beckett and Company, her father's company. When Maya saw the name in the proposal file, her breath caught for a moment. She hadn't heard the name Beckett in months, hadn't said it in years. Out of curiosity more than anything, she agreed to see the representative in person. When the meeting day came, she sat at the head of the glass-walled boardroom, her assistants flanking her. She didn't know what to expect, maybe an old associate, maybe one of Charles's staff. But when the door opened and Charles Beckett stepped in, everything in her went still. He looked older. The confident gleam he always wore had dulled. There were worry lines across his forehead, and the way he carried himself, measured, unsure, was a far cry from the proud man who once seemed invincible to her. "Maya," he said, stunned. "I didn't know." She stood slowly, face unreadable. "Hello, Mr. Beckett. Please, have a seat." Charles faltered. You're the CEO?" She nodded. "And your company is here to pitch for a subcontract, is that correct?" He blinked. "Yes." Maya, I didn't recognize, how long has it been?" Maya gave a polite smile. "Years." He sat, the silence wrapping tight around him. "You look like your mother." "I know," she said simply. The meeting proceeded. She asked questions like she did with every other bidder. She took notes, offered no special expression, no hint of warmth. Charles, visibly shaken, tried to maintain professionalism, but he kept looking at her like she was a ghost. At the end, she rose and extended her hand. "We'll be in touch." That evening, he waited outside the office. Her assistant tried to send him away, but Maya signaled to let him through. "I just want 5 minutes," he said, standing across from her in her minimalist office. "You have 3, she replied. "Maya, I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know what was happening to you. If I had known." "You didn't ask," she said softly. "You never asked. You believed what you were told because it was easier than seeing the truth." He looked away. "She told me you were wasteful," he said. "That you didn't want help. That you were ungrateful." "And you believed her," Maya replied. "Even when I called crying. Even when I begged." "I thought I was doing the right thing," he whispered. "I didn't know how to be a father without your mother." Maya's eyes welled, but not enough to spill. "That's the thing about silence, Dad. It doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it just means no one cared enough to listen." He broke down then, sinking into the chair across from her. "Please. I'm sorry. The company's failing. Lucas and Isabel ran through most of the assets. We need this contract. I don't expect anything from you, I need you to know I'm sorry." Maya studied him. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't about power. It was the sobering realization that she had become the person she needed when she was younger, and now, even the man who once ignored her needed her to survive. She spoke quietly, "You'll get the contract if your company qualifies for it. Not because you're my father, but because your company is still capable of delivering what we need." He looked up, stunned. "But after this," she added, "we go our separate ways." There's nothing left to say. Charles wanted to speak, but he couldn't find words. He simply nodded, stood, and left the room like a man waking up from a long, painful dream. Maya stood alone at the window after he left, staring down at the city that once swallowed her whole. She hadn't forgiven, but she had survived. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The contract was signed. Niotech Innovations was thriving. Maya's success was undeniable, but the family house was cracking from the weight of old secrets and lies. Charles, haunted by Maya's words and growing business troubles, finally demanded the truth from Lillian behind closed doors. At first, she tried to deny everything, her icy smiles and practiced innocence slipping under the pressure. But Charles, for the first time, saw through her carefully built mask when she muttered under her breath that she doesn't even know why Charles is so concerned about a child that doesn't look like him. Her lies, her cruelty, her years of quiet sabotage, they poured out in a bitter confrontation. Without public scandal, Charles made a firm decision. He would divorce Lillian and cut all ties. She was stripped of her place in the family and her access to money. Lillian's pride shattered. She retreated from the household and her children, facing isolation and bitter regret. Without their mother's shield, the siblings faced harsh realities. Charles stopped enabling their reckless behavior, refusing to bail them out of debt and trouble. Lucas's business deals crumbled without their father's backing. Isabel's social status slipped, forcing her to confront who she really was without privilege. In desperation, they turned to Maya, pleading for help, not just financial but forgiveness. Maya listened, but the wounds ran deep. She offered no grand speeches or dramatic reconciliations, only honest boundaries. She made it clear that forgiveness was a process, and trust had to be earned. In the quiet moments, Maya reflected on how far she had come. Her company was thriving, yes, but more importantly, she had found her own voice and self-worth. She no longer needed her father's approval or her stepmother's acceptance. Maya's future was hers to build, unburdened by the chains of the past. Lillian sat alone in a modest apartment, far from the life she once commanded. The silence was heavy, no servants, no luxury, just memories of the family she had lost. Her children, Lucas and Isabel, barely spoke to her anymore. Their resentment was raw and unforgiving. "Mom, this is all on you," Lucas snapped one evening, the weight of their downfall pressing down on them both. "You pushed us into this mess." Isabel nodded, tears welling up. "We had everything, and now, nothing." Lillian's defenses crumbled. For the first time, she faced the consequences of her cruelty, not from outsiders, but from those she had once controlled. Meanwhile, miles away, Charles Beckett sat at his desk late into the night, a letter unopened before him. It was addressed to Maya. He had written and rewritten the words countless times, struggling to find the right way to say what he felt. Apology, hope, regret. He finally sealed it, determination settling in. He would try again to reach his daughter. Not as a businessman or a husband, but as a father seeking a chance to heal what had been broken. Whether Maya would open that door remained a question only time could answer. True family isn't defined by blood or appearances, but by love, protection, and respect. Silence in the face of cruelty can cause deep wounds, but strength, perseverance, and self-worth can turn pain into purpose. Never underestimate the quiet resilience of the forgotten. If you enjoy this story, please like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, stay curious. Who knows what story we will uncover next?